Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome you to FRA's webinar on infrastructure and economic development issues. We're very interested in keeping you updated on those priority policies that impact the wood supply chain, and we think this is a perfect topic. The administration and Congress have identified these as upcoming priorities, and while the rollout has been slowed, we believe it is a perfect time for us to hear from the administration today. And so I'm very pleased and honored to introduce to you Mark Sanborn, the Rural Development Senior Advisor with U.S. Department of Agriculture, and Wiley Deck, Director of Government Affairs with U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Mark and Wiley, thank you so much for taking the time for a webinar today and speaking with FRA members. We all very much appreciate and value the time you're giving us today. But before we get started, I want to just go over a few points for the webinar. Everyone's been muted, of course, except for Wiley and Mark. And all comments and questions are encouraged, and I hope you'll take time to just type in any questions that come to mind in the chat feature that's located on the bottom of your screen. And then we will hold the Q&A until after both Mark and Wiley have given their presentations. If for some reason you're having any trouble, please don't hesitate to call the office, 202-296-3937. Also, if for some reason you are not muted, we ask that you do mute yourself on your phone. All right, I think with that, we're ready to kick it off. So Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on with the folks from FRA. Really enjoyed working with your association here in DC, and looking forward to the conversation with all of you. I was going to cover 3 areas today, and then give as much opportunity for questions as possible. The 3 areas I was hoping to cover is the Rural Prosperity Task Force, which was released a few months ago. Then I was going to discuss the the infrastructure plan, as it relates to what was released in the FY 2019 budget. And then finally, I figured I would close out on going over a couple of the programs here at Rural Development that I think might be applicable to everything, to some of the things your membership might be working on. And just one note on the infrastructure plan, I'm not going to be able to go into as much detail as we would like. Right now, there's a pretty close hold on the outline and the details of the infrastructure plan, mainly because right now the White House and the Congress are still debating some of the details. And in this political environment, once something is released, if there isn't 100% agreement, you kind of can never put that genie back in the bottle. So while the White House and Congress are negotiating and trying to find areas of agreement, so what gets released, there's consensus on, we're really not allowed to discuss much of the details, to not interfere with those negotiations. So with that, though, let me start with the Rural Prosperity Task Force. It was signed, was created by the president in spring of 2017, and it involved over 20 agencies, federal agencies, and Secretary Perdue and the Department of Agriculture were the lead agencies. The last thing, and I'm going to be very brief on the last one, it's more just a resource for you all. I had sent Ryan a summary of Rural Development's programs. I'm just going to touch really briefly on ones I think might be applicable to this audience, but if he hasn't done so already, hopefully Ryan can send that around. We have about 50 programs here in Rural Development: grant, loan, guaranteed loan, and direct loans. And and I might not be aware of one of those programs that might be of interest. So, I'm happy to have the folks at FRA send out my contact information for any of the members who have specific questions following our discussion. So with that, let me really, the heart of what I want to talk about is the Rural Prosperity Task Force. It identified 5 key indicators for rural America, that really show whether, what is needed to achieve rural prosperity in communities. And the first is e-connectivity for rural America. That's mainly broadband, but some of the other aspects of, elements that fall under e-connectivity, that is no longer just, a nice thing to have. It's a necessity. Quality of life improvement is number 2. Support for rural workforce is number 3. Technological innovation is number 4, and economic development is number 5. And based on what I know about your membership, those are all things that you all play a part in. So know that you have an administration that wants to work on all of those elements. And it's really what is driving the effort here at USDA, and that includes infrastructure. You are going to see a focus on us putting the resources we have in any budget we receive here at USDA in things that produce those outcomes. So as you're thinking about interaction with the federal government, and particularly USDA and our programs in rural development, those are the areas you're going to see us concentrating on. And for the infrastructure dollars we do receive that are earmarked for rural America, that's really where you're going to see a lot of focus. So the Rural Prosperity Task Force report is out, and there's also a summary of it. And again, I'm happy to provide that with Ryan for you all to look through. And it really lays out a great policy statement on what this administration is going to be focusing on generally and specifically in rural America. When it comes to the infrastructure here at Rural Development, I would say, again, e-connectivity is going to be huge. But then the other areas where we have a lot of direct ability to be supportive is in water and sewer projects, and then other telecom and electricity. But the exciting news is that this administration's infrastructure plan has a carve out for rural America that USDA is going to have a big part in, and that is that those dollars are the more traditional projects that you would think of when folks talk about infrastructure. It's a broader term, and this president and administration uses the term broadly, but most people think of surface transportation when they think of infrastructure. And for the first time, USDA will really have some ability to directly play in that area. And we're very excited about that opportunity, potential opportunity. Obviously, this is just the first step, and Congress has a long way to go to approving any or all of what the administration and the president has put forward. But if it does come to fruition, and we do think that this is an area where there is a lot of agreement about the need to invest in these communities, both for in the type of programs that we've always been able to put some dollars into, and also playing a part in the transportation infrastructure in these areas. So we're really excited about this potential opportunity. So, and we think you see a lot. If you look at the FY 2019 budget proposal from the president and the administration, I think it's very much in line, and particularly the programs that involve rural America are right in line with the Rural Prosperity Task Force. So, I think despite what you hear in the media, I do think that when it comes to these issues, the administration has actually been pretty effective, at least expressing our policy goals and outcomes we'd like to see, and where we'd like to see dollars leverage for great outcomes for all of America, and what is sometimes forgotten part of it, the rural part of it. And then the last thing I want to touch on, and then like I said, I want to hand it over to Wiley, and then really have hopefully an opportunity for some good back and forth, is as I said, we have about 50 grant, direct loan, and guaranteed loan programs here at Rural Development. And one that we've been able to really leverage with stakeholders like you all are the value added. Those are the programs where we offer dollars in various forms to if a business is trying to expand and grow, utilizing any products or biomass is a great example. The technology has developed to the point where the byproducts and what used to get thrown into the garbage can now have another use. And it's a great way for an existing company to expand. And so I just thought that might be one area where some of you all or the companies you interact with, or your own companies and stakeholders, might be involved in some of that. But we have a ton of other stuff. And even if it's one of our programs, even if you can't directly tap into it, but your community can, and by your community making those improvements in either housing or utilities or business, economic development, it creates opportunities for you all, to expand your business, or to, and just improve the opportunities there. So for here at Rural Development, that's really our focus. Secretary Perdue, when he was governor of Georgia, he really made the focus of his administration customer service and improving government efficiency and effectiveness. So that's really the message, that I carry on behalf of the secretary, and that's he wants USDA to be a partner with private, public, and nonprofit sectors. He wants us to offer good customer service. He wants us to be, really user-friendly. And like I said, he's, he was, the head of the Prosperity Task Force that really laid out, where we want to see some investment. And it really is across sectors. In the farming, it's businesses just that happen to be located in rural America. We want to see economic development, jobs created, and improved quality of life, education, telemedicine, all the things that go into folks' daily living. We want rural America to be just as attractive to young folks as they're trying to figure out where they want to settle, and have just as many opportunities in rural America as they might in suburban or the urban parts of our country. So that's really our focus. And we're excited about some of the proposals. We're looking forward to the conversation between the administration and Congress about where they want to take the remainder of this budget, next year's budget, and where they want to go with both the Farm Bill that directly relates to the authorization of our programs here. And then, like I said, really excited about the potential opportunity that will be a part of the surface transportation plan that's been brought forward, and have a small piece in that additional part of such important part of a rural community being, a great place to live and do business in that surface transportation.
Thank you, Mark. That was really interesting. And we're going to hold the questions until the very end. So as we're going through the webinar, I hope you all are making notes, or you can definitely type them up on the screen, and we'll get right to them. But now we're going to move over to Wiley Deck, the Director of Government Affairs with U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So, Wiley?
Well, thank you very much, and I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I guess at least for the basically almost all of what Mark said earlier, ditto. He said it, rural America and assisting rural communities is a top priority for this administration. And Secretary Chow not a day goes by that she's not addressing what are we doing today to help rural America and the rural communities, and what can we do to improve their lives. And that is a major focus for us. Now, at FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, where we regulate large trucks and buses, we have a different effect on folks. We address, obviously, hours of service. We have the new issue of electronic logging devices and those types of things. And I want to address those two things in addition to the truck weights issue. We're under new management. So I want to reiterate what Mark said, in that we have an open door policy. We're looking to be more responsive to organizations such as you and others, and trying to be accommodating where we can under the law. Now, I know some of you have concerns about the new electronic logging device mandate that went into effect on December 18th of last year. It may not affect a good number of you. It just depends on your situation. There are a number of exemptions that were placed into the rule. There's the 100-mile exemption. If you don't exceed the 100 miles from your point of work, then there are no electronic logging devices required. You just report to that one space, that one workspace for a 12-hour period. If you exceed the 100 miles, there's another exemption that you could possibly benefit from, and that's the 8 days and 30 provision, where if you don't go outside the 100 miles radius, now this is air miles, so it works out to about 120 road miles. If you don't exceed that radius more than 8 times in a 30-day period, you will not need electronic logging devices. You will need to calculate your hours of service for that time, but no electronic logging devices are required. You do not qualify for the agricultural hours of service exemption. We were prescribed by Congress what delineates into an agricultural commodity, and generally that refers to food products. And at this time, until Congress decides to make this change, forest products are not considered agriculture, no matter whether they're determined to be agriculture under state law and state regulations. Under federal law, they are not determined to be an agricultural product. But you may fall under some of the other exemptions that are available. As for truck weights, that generally is not an area that is covered by FMCSA. That's generally a Federal Highways Administration area, and I know that they've been working with a number of folks from your industry to address this issue, and they're also they've had meetings with members of Congress as well. But look forward to further discussion on this and any other issues that you have and you want to talk about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Wiley. And now I've got a chance to go into Q&A. We missed a slide there for you. And I think we just need to wait to see if anyone has put any up on the screen.
Mark, one of the questions that I think would be good to address as well is how, maybe related to the Farm Bill and infrastructure, as you touched on biomass, how more would that be, and where would they have access access to the programs to kind of develop those types of things through USDA?
So yeah, I hate to sound like a bureaucrat, so I apologize up front that the beginning of this is going to be somewhat of a bureaucratic answer. So and DC minutia. So basically, so as you were talking about the Farm Bill, in the last couple of Farm Bills, they've increased the amount of opportunity under biomass, both through programs that offer funding and recognizing those segments of the industry. So, it's hard to talk about it in a vacuum. What I would say is this. The program summary I sent you, the programs that contain funding for biomass are outlined in there, and so it's like I said, it's a little hard to just describe generally, but very broadly speaking, USDA and particularly rural development programs with the last couple farm bills have been increasingly the opportunity to invest in that sector has increased. They keep refining. The definitions to match, improving the definitions to match what is really happening out there. So what I would say is, take a look at where the programs are today, and then if and when you have opportunities to talk about it, I'm not allowed to ask you to lobby for Congress. So please know I am not asking you to do any lobbying, but I will say this, as you look through our programs as they exist today, the opportunity to make changes often is in statute. And if that is the case, obviously, that's for Congress to decide. But if you're looking through, one thing neither Wiley and I really hit much of, Wiley talked about it some specifically with the ELDs and the regs surrounding ELDs and truck size and weight. But I don't mean to speak for Wiley. So folks know, I came from DOT, so Wiley and I know each other, and I believe what I'm about to say he'd echo. If, as you've looked into any of these programs, there are regulations that you are aware of are roadblocks, this is the time, this is the administration to talk about that. I don't think there has ever been an administration that has focused on regulations more than this one, and taken real true ownership and follow through. And so these first couple of years of the administration are the time to say, I've tried to get involved, but because of the way the regs are written, they're either roadblocks for it to be practical for me as a business person to get involved, or it doesn't really reflect a good understanding of what it's like in the real world. This is the time to get that information. So without knowing specifics about the company, what a company is interested in hearing about, all I can say is this rural development specifically has continued to do more and more in that space, both generally and then in the value added portion of it. Take a look at the programs. I'm happy to help someone if they want to try and tap into that. And if as they're looking into that, and there's a regulatory component that you think might be, a change might lead to better opportunities for businesses in America in general and in rural America specifically, please get those to us. We really want to hear about them. And the DOT has done a great job with reg reform. And it's something that's becoming more and more a priority here at USDA for the Secretary Perdue, and really starting to kick in some good reg reform for all the different areas here at USDA.
And I'm going to chime in on this. And Mark is absolutely right. No administration has been as open to reg reform as this one, and we're more than happy to address any issues that you bring up. And I will make sure that FRA sends out my contact information as well. A lot of these, and I'll go back to the hours of service and electronic logging device issues. It can depend to some extent on what your company does, how it operates, whether or not these even apply to you. So I'd be happy to have that discussion with you offline, because sometimes, like I said, it's more of an individual basis rather than a global one answers everything.
Wiley, this is Deb. I appreciate you spending appreciate both of your comments, and I do appreciate your point on the ELDs and the hours of service, because there has been a lot of confusion around that, and I think we've tried to answer it as best we can. I think your clarification on how the federal government views what an ag product is and what's qualified under that exemption and other exemptions that may be out there. So offering your services as you have, I know will be of benefit. And is there any type of document or something that you have or on the website or that we can refer to help us get a better understanding?
There's some ELD exemption information on our website, and what I'll do is I'll email that to you. Okay. And have you send that around to folks. We're also looking at some areas that will help on split sleeper berth, but I don't think that's going to affect the vast majority of your members, because they're generally not the very long haul
right.
drivers.
Right.
So I definitely would. If anybody has questions, just contact FRA, and they'll make sure you have my contact information, and I'll be happy to discuss any issue with you.
Okay, thank you. We do have a question. I don't know if you all can see it on your screen, so I'll go ahead and read it. It's from Dale Lemons out in Washington State. And with the highway funding being proposed at present, no fuel tax has been on the table. Is the administration open to increasing the federal fuel tax is the first question. And then from the trucking perspective, this is the most efficient way to collect taxes as the process is already in place, rather than creating another mechanism to collect more taxes such as tolling. So we'd like to know your thoughts on that.
Pass. I think from what the president has said that he's willing to consider any options and in his discussions with the Congress on funding for the new infrastructure package.
Okay.
Very non-committal bureaucratic answer.
I know. Well, I do think
like Mark was saying, because of the deliberations going on between the administration and Congress, we can't, lay anything out there or throw anything on the table or off the table.
Yeah, and Deb, I'll just kind of back my good friend Wiley up. Even though this is obviously now that's much more a question in the U.S. DOT world. I will say this, and again, and I preface this just so to make sure folks know, we Wiley and I as federal employees can't encourage anyone to lobby Congress. But what I think is totally appropriate for us to say is this. Every time, and just so folks know my background, it's kind of split between, rural policy and transportation. In the Bush administration, I worked at both here at Rural Development and at US DOT. I've worked in a state DOT in New Hampshire, where I'm from, and then this go around in the first year, I've split my time between DOT and USDA. So I've been around the transportation funding conversation. And what I do think I would say and feel very comfortable saying is that everyone talks about magic bullets. And there really isn't any one thing that's going to solve this problem. Even, again, not advocating or supporting, but just from an intellectual perspective, even increasing the gas tax is somewhat of a Band-Aid long-term, given where the development of vehicles that either move people or goods. Everything that's been proposed is either has a lot more to be flushed out or would only temporarily solve the problems. Now, some would add a lot more funding than other fixes. I understand that, and I don't want to be disingenuous. But I mean, I think what really has to happen is for all the folks that really care about this issue, what they have to do is encourage their elected officials to really be willing to get out of their comfort zone politically, and to let them know that they won't be penalized for getting outside their comfort zone. I mean, that's ultimately why this isn't moving forward. It's a dangerous topic, and when someone brings it up, either it doesn't go anywhere, so they look like failures, or or if they're from folks where there's less willingness on behalf of the electorate to support increases in collection of dollars by the federal or state governments, they get hammered for increasing taxes. So I mean, what it really will take is the American public letting their elected officials have the conversation and not penalize them for simply having the conversation. I mean, it's really been a stalled conversation for 15 years. So every conference I went to of AASHTO, which is all the state DOTs, I mean, this issue of the gas tax, and when is that really going to happen came up, and there just never seems to be the real political moment in time that it's politically viable to talk about it.
No, we understand, and I know that can be frustrating. If you all have a few more minutes, we do have another question, and I know that you mentioned earlier, Wiley, that you don't have much say in truck weight issues, but we do have a question on if there's any type of acknowledgement to encourage truck weights on the interstate highways to match that on the state weight limits.
There's been some discussions, but that's all it is at this point. Okay. No movement on actual increasing truck weights. It's a very hot topic, as in sort of like talking how you're going to fund the Highway Trust Fund.
I was just about to say, everything I just said about the gas tax applies to truck limits and weight limits and size limits.
Absolutely, and that's something that the Congress gets heavily involved in. Any discussions on increasing truck lengths and weights, they weigh in heavily on one way or another.
Yes, that's been our experience. So I think we've got time for one more question.
Yeah, this is more for Wiley, and this question pertains to that 100 air mile exemption. How is that exemption enforced? Is that based on where the truck picks up the load? Is it based on where it turns on the engine that day, or is it based on where the truck originates from the business and the business? Yeah, can you give a little bit more light on that?
Sure, and we've run into some different scenarios, talking with various companies and how they operate. In some instances, it can be where the truck starts out from the business headquarters, wherever its main operating location is, driving out to wherever they're going to load up the logs, and then out to the mill or wherever their final destination is. We've run across some forestry companies that they never exceed the 100 miles from their point of origin, from their original place of business. So they're fully covered. We've run into some others where companies where they're more, well, they'll send a truck out and they will set up shop basically at a hotel for a few days or, you know, a week or whatever, and they operate the hotel as their base of operations, so they get 100 miles from there. So if it's a long distance travel from the business to the hotel, that would count on your normal hours of service. Odds are you're not doing that more than 8 times in a 30-day period. And that's per driver. That's not per company. That's per driver. And then you would get the 100 miles based on their operating location, if I'm making myself clear. So for the hotel would then become the base of operations for that truck. And so it'd be 100 miles from that location itself, not the original business starting point.
Okay. Thank you, Wiley. I don't think we have any other questions. And please, if those of you that are still on the phone, please don't hesitate to email me any questions you might have or you didn't get a chance to ask. We'd be happy to follow up with Mark and Wiley on that. But really do appreciate everyone's time today. Mark and Wiley, thank you so much. We look forward to working with you moving forward.
Thank you. I do too.
Yep.